Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program is about to begin in 10 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, the program will begin in 2 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming this year's co-chairs of the event and Human Options board members, Diane Biagianti and Jason Weintraub.
Excited to be here in the room where it happens. We are also have an opportunity to be live streaming the event, so we have people listening remotely, which is fantastic to have just about everybody who can participate in whatever way they're comfortable. So we are excited about that. This event has been a tradition for as long as I can remember. In fact, I was introduced to Human Options at this event 12 years ago, and I've been on the board ever since. It is, each year, we introduce a topic and a speaker that is meant to be inspiring, and this year will not be an exception to that, I'm sure. So a lot has changed in the last 2 years since we've been in this room for this event around the world. But what hasn't changed is our mission for Human Options, and that is to shed a light on relationship violence and bring a greater awareness and understanding to this important public health issue. So as I look out over the audience today, it's fantastic, and I love to see all the purple. Thank you so much for your support by wearing the purple. It looks amazing from up here. But I see a lot of familiar faces, and I see a lot of new faces. So for those of you who are familiar with the organization, thank you so much for your continued support. We sincerely appreciate it. And for those of you who are new to the organization, we hope that something you hear today inspires you to learn more about who we are, what we do, and hopefully you'll get engaged as I did 12 years ago. So please feel free to start your lunches. One of the things we pride ourselves on is making sure that we keep on track and get you out of here on time back to your busy day. So I will turn it over to Jason.
Thanks, Diane. Hello, everyone. I'm so honored to be co-chairing this event with Diane. I'm very proud to be a board member at Human Options and to support the organization's critical mission to break the cycle of relationship violence. To see all of you here and to know that so many more are watching virtually is inspiring. And I should say before I begin, don't forget there are Human Options staff members around the room selling tickets to our great opportunity drawing that'll happen at the end of our luncheon. They're waving their hands in the back. Lots of people seem to want them, so get your tickets before the drawing. First, I want to thank our fellow board members of Human Options, whose commitment to this organization and its mission is essential and most appreciated. Each of you makes an important impact to Human Options, and Diane and I are grateful to serve along with you. Would all of our board members please stand to be recognized? I'd also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the incredible Human Options team that works tirelessly behind the scenes. I wish you could meet every member of our staff who give their all to our clients every day. I also want to thank our advancement team that coordinated every detail behind today's luncheon. But there's one staff member I want to mention in particular who I do want you to meet, and that's Nora Caldwell. Nora has been the backbone of this event for years and is retiring tomorrow after 14 years at Human Options. Prior to that, Nora was a client and board member at Human Options, and we can't thank her enough for everything she has done, and we wish her a very happy retirement. Human Options won't be the same without her.
Good afternoon. I'm Selena Doka. I'm the current president of our board, and on behalf of our board, we just want to express our sincere appreciation to Nora for all of her contributions and service to this organization. As Jason mentioned, she took a different route to where she is today, first as a client, and then I had the pleasure of working with her side by side on our board as she served 2 terms back in the late 90s and early 2000s. I think she was such an invaluable member of our board. We jointly concluded that she could provide even more value to Human Options if she worked for us full-time. So we recruited her, and she's been here ever since. We just, on behalf of current and former board members and other longtime supporters of Human Options, we just want to wish her the very best in her retirement and thank her again for all of her contributions. And I know Maricela has a few words as well.
Whoa. It feels like a pay no attention to what's happening behind the scenes here moment. I think we needed a little levity right now. As everyone has said, Nora has been an amazing ambassador for this organization. She has such heart and such a great way of connecting individuals. I remember every single time I have a conversation with Nora, it is absolutely one of the most animated conversations. Her eyes light up. You can see the wheels turning in her head because she instantly knows who needs to be connected to us in order to be able to advance the mission. Nora, please come up here. I know it's a bit much for you. So Nora, I know you like to refer to yourself as the house guest that never left. And I wanted to tell you, you're family, and you're always welcome. And we want you to know everybody in this room had an opportunity to send in words that best describe you. And this is a compilation of the words that describe you and all the impact you've had in this organization. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for gifting us your time. We love you. Congratulations on your retirement, and you're not going to go that far.
this is like, I don't even know what to say. Human Options has just been, this has been my family. Most of you know, I call myself the house guest that never left because in 1993, I walked into the shelter, which was then in Laguna Beach, with my daughters, and they saved my life. They saved their lives. And from there, in 1996, I came on the board, and then in 2008, I came to work for the organization, and you're all part of my life and my family, and I don't even know what to say here. You definitely have taken my breath away. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for caring about this mission. And I think we're going to get ready to hear an incredible speaker. Rachel Louise Snyder is going to be wonderful. And enjoy your lunch. And I really, truly don't know what else to Thank you.
Thank you again, Nora, for everything you've done for Human Options. Now I'd like to thank our terrific Fall Luncheon Committee. You have gone above and beyond creating what will be an inspiring afternoon for us all. Can all the members of the committee please stand to be recognized? And now, Diane and I would like to take a moment to thank our generous sponsors. On the screen, there should be a list of all of the sponsors who've contributed so generously to the event today, and we are grateful for their support. Your support ensures we can continue to bring vital programs to the many individuals who seek safety at our 12 locations in Orange County. Because of you, we are able to provide prevention programs that educate students and parents, as well as healthcare and law enforcement professionals across the county. You are helping us to change lives and create a stronger community by working together to end the cycle of relationship violence. Without your support, we could not continue to bring these vital programs and services to those impacted by relationship violence here in Orange County. So we thank you and offer another round of applause to our sponsors. Please continue to enjoy your lunch, and we'll resume the program shortly.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Human Options CEO, Maricela Rios Faust.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Please continue to enjoy your lunches. This is such a great event. When we were trying to decide whether it was going to be in-person, hybrid, or just all remote, I think we felt it was important to bring the community together, and we're so excited that we did. This is so great. Thank you for being here. Please continue to enjoy your lunches. I'm Maricela Rios Faust, and I have the great honor and privilege of leading Human Options as the Chief Executive Officer. Before I go any further, I wanted to thank our incredible chairs, Diane and Jason. Thank you so much for your leadership. Thank you so much for your leadership and the enthusiasm with which you've approached this event. Sometime during the day, you will receive this piece of art that was created for you by a child at our emergency shelter. Just want to read what it says. When 11-year-old Alice was asked, "What does change look like for you?" she shared, "The scariest but best change in my life happened when my mom and siblings left our dark home where there was a lot of yelling and violence and came to second step. I was scared because I didn't know where we were going, but knew it would be better. The sunset is the hope second step has given me, and I know that we will be okay." Thank you so much for your leadership. Please join me in thanking them. Some of you that have been here before know that I generally draw inspiration from my daughter. She's 11 years old. So she saw me working on my speech and looks over and says, "Mom, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm working on my remarks for the fall luncheon." And she says, "Oh, the one I help you with?" I said, yeah, the one you helped me with. And she says, "Well, what are you going to say?" And I said, "Well, I'm really struggling here. I mean, there's been so much that's happened in this last year." And she says, "Well, Mom, don't tell them what the problem is. They all already know." I said, "All right, I could do that." And she says, "Well, how much time do you have?" And I said, "Well, 3 to 5 minutes." And she says, "Mom, you can't talk about everything you do in 3 to 5 minutes." I said, "Good point." And she says, "Keep it short and speak from the heart." And I said, "Okay, so here we go." October is National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. It recognizes the work that advocates do nationwide. You see us wearing purple. Purple is the color that symbolizes courage, and it's the courage that women need when fleeing an abusive relationship. Those of you wearing purple in the room, thank you so much. Those of you that are here to celebrate Domestic Violence Awareness Month, thank you for being here. Thank you for honoring the work that we do and for all the advocates. I'd like to take a quick minute to thank all the staff in the room. You guys are incredible. You make me proud every day. Please stand up to be recognized. Domestic Violence Awareness Month and raising awareness took on a different meaning this year. For many of us, we knew that there was an urgency and a need to get attention on the issue quickly so that we can get assistance to those that needed it. I can't think of a single story this year that I could highlight that delivers the entire impact that this organization has had as a result of all of your support throughout the year. But when I think about Domestic Violence Awareness Month and think about all of the advocates that have come to the aid of somebody in need, 3 stories come to mind. The first is 2 healthcare practitioners who were driving down the 5 freeway and witnessed Maria and her daughter being shoved out of the car and left on the side of the road. They quickly jumped to action and drove them to our Family Resource Center so that they could get help. I think of the store manager who noticed that Joanne had been coming in late, was disheveled, and looked tired. This was not her normal appearance. And so he asked her, "What's going on?" And Joanne shared, "My husband has been forcing me to sleep outside. I don't have a phone, and I can't use the services in the house." That manager took that moment to put her in a room and connect her to our emergency hotline. I also think about the coworker who knew that Beth was in trouble and knew that Beth's husband, working remote, was creating more tension in that home and that Beth needed help. So every week, she made it a point to reach out to Beth and say, "What can I do for you? How can I help?" And together, they developed a safety plan. Those are the advocates. They're not paid staff. They are each and every one of you who contribute to this mission every day. Every single person in this room has the power to change a life. All it takes is listening and a big heart, which I know you all have. I want to take a minute to thank all of you again for just being who you are and caring about this mission with your whole hearts, and for creating a space where victims and survivors feel safe and can reach out. Because whenever there is a Maria and a Joanne and a Beth, I have no doubt that each person in this room will be here for them. Thank you. We have seen such incredible impact by educating our community partners and raising awareness on this issue. This next 3 years, we will be really increasing that push and make sure that what we are doing creates a better response for victims and survivors countywide, that we're educating more health practitioners, more human resource professionals, more corporations, and we ask you to join us in that work. Today, we have a special video for you. A couple years ago, we entered into a partnership with the Santa Ana Police Department, and that partnership was one that the city invested in and the police department was 100% in. What we sought to do was make sure that we could create a place where victims felt safe sharing their stories and that they felt heard. Law enforcement officers were at a loss. Their job is to enforce laws, and they don't often know how to provide support. But this partnership created an advocate in the car on the weekends that could help be responsive to the emotional need of survivors while officers investigated so that any laws that were broken could be further prosecuted. I'd like you to draw your attention to the screens to watch a quick video.
So in October, I went through domestic violence with my abuser. He had grabbed his phone and he had punched me in the mouth with it. And I started screaming for help as I saw an officer across the street. My abuser then decided to flee. So he got on the freeway and made a big old circle, came back to where the incident had occurred. We then drove a little up more and there was a big lot. So he actually went into the driveway and I started just like pushing and trying to get him to stop the car. And then I saw that he wasn't. He was just like, "We're all gonna die today." So at that point, I was scared that we were all gonna die because he was gonna run us into something. I could tell he was on drugs. And so then my instincts were to turn off the car. And my daughter, my oldest daughter, she grabbed her little sister. I grabbed my son and we started running. And we ran into the big lots. And after we came out, Officer Cerna was there.
My name is Daniel Cerna. I'm a police officer with the Santa Ana Police Department. The call gave a description of a female with 3 children and also provided a vehicle description. Irene initially didn't say anything to me. She just looked at me. And it was her daughter who spoke up and said, "Yep, that's our car." And I knew I was with the correct individuals.
I just kept telling him, I was like, "I don't want to lose my kids. I don't want to lose my kids." And the way that he approached was, he's like, "It's fine." He goes, "It's okay. Like, I'm here to help you." And it was the first time in many calls that I've made that I actually made it. I felt that like someone was actually here to help.
My name is Maria, and I am a domestic violence advocate, and I'm part of the domestic violence response team. We go out and we collaborate with Santa Ana PD, and we respond to domestic violence calls. I remember being in the car and just looking at Irene and the fear that she had in her eye. She was so confused. She just didn't know what had happened. I know that she had got into a physical altercation with her partner. She was trying to keep it together for sure for her kids.
Maria and I were together, and right away we, listened to Irene's story, basically what she's been through in the past couple of weeks. And then we basically, started talking to her about some of the resources that we have in our county. And we told her about our shelter and how she can go to the shelter with her family because she was living out of her car.
I finally, I got the help that day. It's just the support. As soon as I got here, like, everybody was just like, okay, there's resources for here, so that helped out a lot. In less than 2 months, I got full custody of my daughter, and, my abuser was in jail. So I was like, okay, things are, finally going for me.
This partnership is very unique in that it allows us as advocates to go out and empower women. It allows us to educate them around the cycle of domestic violence. A lot of these women aren't aware of our services, are aware that they're even in an unhealthy relationship because it's generational abuse. No other agency here in Orange County offers a domestic violence advocate, so I think for us to be able to partner with Santa Ana PD is such an incredible thing for us to even have that opportunity.
I grew up in the city of Santa Ana, and I wanted to get back. So being a part of the domestic violence response team allows me to do that, to fulfill my life goal, to go out there and provide those, help my community.
So I wrote Officer Cerna a letter thanking him for being the officer that responded. It was the first time that, like I said, that I felt that someone wasn't just taking me as another case. Someone actually cared and was willing to go above and beyond just to make sure that my children and I were safe. I'm very grateful for him and also for Maria, the advocate. It's just the support that I had from both of them.
Her letter was very positive for me because thank God she did receive the services, and she's a success. She was able to break that cycle of violence that was in her family for many generations. So I'm very grateful for her, and I appreciate the letter that she wrote. It was very nice.
I grew up with the background of, abuse, domestic violence through my family. So I remind my children every day that what I went through and what they went through, because they saw it's not okay. And, and I will always be there for them unconditionally, even if, they do right or wrong. So that makes me emotionally happy to know that, like, I can finally say, hey, you know what, like, I did the right thing without being scared.
Please join me in welcoming Irene to the stage.
I just want to tell everyone thank you for everything. I finally, I was able to break the cycle, and I'm so proud to be able to, show my daughters that, I can be an example for them. So, and I'm really happy.
Those are always the best stories to hear. It's just a tremendous impact. Joining us back on stage are Diane and Jason.
Irene, thank you so much for sharing your story, putting together this video. It takes a lot of courage to put your life out there for a room full of strangers, and we are so inspired and touched by your story. That's the reason I joined 12 years ago, and okay. So we'll just give that a minute. Okay. So, that video is just a great example of not only a brave and resilient mom, but what we can do as a community working with our partnerships and our police partners. Domestic violence, it hides in the shadows, but the pandemic has really brought it into the light. Over the last year, both law enforcement and Human Options saw a dramatic increase in calls for assistance. In Orange County, law enforcement, in 2019, we had just under 11,000 domestic violence calls. In 2020, that number increased by 25%. At Human Options in 2020, our hotline calls increased by over 63% for folks looking for emergency shelter, counseling, legal advocacy services. In addition to those calls for urgent services, we are now helping individuals and families deal with the long-term trauma brought about by the physical and emotional isolation they experienced because of the pandemic. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the part of the program where we ask for your help. We need you to work together with us to make sure that we continue those partnerships that we have, like Domestic Violence Response Team and our hotline services, that we can continue to offer help to victims and families experiencing relationship violence. We ask that each of you consider a donation, whether you're listening remotely, whether you're here in the room, because we know we all can make a difference in our community. Your donations, no matter the size of the donation, will have an impact on someone's life, just like Irene's. Whether it's an impact on providing food, shelter during that emergency period, tough time, whether it's the legal advocacy services that are offered for child custody, restraining orders, whatever that might be, or maybe it's the subsidized housing that we provide as the family's getting back on their feet on that journey towards healing. All those donations make a difference every day in the life of these women and families. So please consider.
There's a Rebuild a Life form and pen at your place setting. Please use it to make a donation of any amount to our programs. You can also use text to give by texting Human Options to 50155. As Diane said, no amount is too small. Every dollar helps us to keep doing this important work. As a reminder of the importance of Human Options' mission, the New York Times reported just a couple of years ago that during the period from 2000 to 2006, more than 3 times as many women died at the hands of their husbands and boyfriends as American soldiers died in combat. Here in America, 58% of murdered women were killed by a current or former partner. And as we'll hear from our incredible speaker a bit later, in 2018, just 3 years ago, the United Nations declared that statistically speaking, the most dangerous place for a woman is her own home. This must change, and Human Options exists to lead that effort. I hope you will join Diane and me in supporting this vital mission. Our work can only be done with your help, and each of us can make a significant impact. As you can see on the screen, $5,000 supports domestic violence advocates in collaboration with police departments, like we just saw in the video. $1,000 buys 1 month of nutritious food for a family staying at the emergency shelter. $250 offers 2 weeks of diapers, toiletries, and linens at the emergency shelter. Even $100 provides a night of safety and shelter for a family. But of course, any amount can help bring a family like Irene's life-changing help and services. I want to thank you sincerely from the bottom of our hearts for your generosity. And there will be staff members circulating through the room to collect your donations and forms. And on behalf of Human Options, thank you for your support.
I know there are people roaming to collect. Thank you for whatever you can give. Thank you for helping us make the future a better place for our children. So we are moving on to the main event of the day. It's time to introduce Rachel Louise Snyder, journalist, writer, and domestic violence advocate. Her latest book is No Visible Bruises: What We Don't Know About Domestic Violence Can Kill Us. It was named one of the 10 best books of 2019 by the New York Times. It's a compelling work of investigative journalism with the narrative force of a novel. No Visible Bruises reveals that one of America's most urgent social problems takes place behind closed doors. And as Jason said, the most dangerous place for a woman statistically is in her own home. Whether we call it domestic violence, private violence, or intimate terrorism, it has a far more pervasive impact on our society than many of us realize. With tireless reporting and deft storytelling, she transforms the way we view domestic violence and gives us concrete steps that can save lives. As a journalist, Rachel has traveled to more than 50 countries, covering stories of human rights, natural disaster, and war. She hosted the nationally syndicated global affairs series Latitudes on public radio, and her stories have aired on Marketplace and All Things Considered. Her print work has appeared in The New Yorker, The New York Times Magazine, The Washington Post, The Huffington Post, Chicago Tribune, among many others. She has lived in Cambodia for 6 years before relocating to Washington, D.C., where she is now an assistant professor in the creative writing program at American University. I know Rachel shares the mission of Human Options in eradicating relationship violence, and I could not be more thrilled to introduce her to you today. Please join me in welcoming Rachel Louise Snyder.
I remembered to wear pants, so we're already winning today. I'm not tracking my texts, I'm keeping track of my time, lest you think I'm, excuse me. I have to say, I'm thrilled to be here, and not just because California is my favorite state in the country, which it totally is. Thank you so much for having me. No, I spend as much time here as I can. People in DC are like, oh, you're so California. I'm like, thank you, thank you. It's like the nicest compliment ever. But this is actually an incredibly special day for me that I'm gonna share with you, in part because there's a lot of sharing going on, but this is my first public appearance post-cancer treatment. Whoop, whoop. I had a very interesting pandemic. So I am thrilled to be here professionally, but I'm also just thrilled to be here, So I'm going to talk a little bit today about how I came to domestic violence, because I really came kind of through the back door. I studied fiction in grad school. Like, I have an MFA in fiction. You know, my parents were like, uh-oh. But ironically, someday it would be that very training in fiction that would enable me to really understand domestic violence. And I'm going to talk about the braiding of those two things a little bit. As you know, I have traveled to many, many countries. I've lived overseas in a few, Cambodia being the most interesting. And I did stories of social justice all over the world. I did stories of Afghan women in jail for love crimes in Kabul. I did stories of child brides in so many countries I can't even keep track of them anymore. Stories of gang rape. in Cambodia, which was a kind of weekend sport for well-heeled Khmer kids, boys. And in all of these stories, domestic violence was in the background of all of them. I mean, I never met a child bride in Niger, in Romania, and in India who didn't have domestic violence in her life. I never met, you know, a Tibetan woman who had been forcibly sterilized who didn't have domestic violence in her background. So much so that I just assumed that there was domestic violence, and I'm not proud to say this, but I feel it's important to admit that I didn't even ask about it. I was like, well, yeah, of course she gets beaten up. That's not the story, though. The story is, how does she live under the streets of Bucharest in the sewer system? That's the story, not how she got there, right? So I was operating with these kind of blinders on, which I didn't even know at the time. It was really, I mean, if domestic violence was a thought at all for me, it was an abstraction, as it is for many Americans, especially when you read headlines like, domestic dispute leads to homicide. Imagine any other crime. If there's any headline writers that you know, for the love of God, tell them to get that phrase out of the head, you know. Domestic dispute leads to gang warfare. Like, come on, you know? Anyway, I could talk about that for a long time, but that's not part of my talk. So in 2009, I had lived in London for a couple of years, and then I lived in Cambodia for a lot longer than I intended, and I moved back to the States. I moved to Washington, D.C., and I was visiting a friend in Boston, north of Boston, and he and his family were preparing to do this annual camping trip that they do every year, and his sister drove up. And he introduced me, and I, you know, did that thing that Americans do. Hi, I'm Rachel. What do you do for a living? Like, no other interesting thing to say. And she said, oh, I work for a local domestic violence agency in town. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. You know, there's social justice there, whatever. And I said, oh, yeah, cool, yeah. Like, what do you do? Like, you run a shelter or something? Like, you know. And she said, oh, well, actually, we've just started a program where we try to predict domestic violence homicide before it happens in order to prevent it. I'm just going to say that again because it's an unbelievable sentence. Predict domestic violence homicide before it happens in order to prevent it. It truly stopped me in my tracks. I was like, come again? You do what? And she said, oh yeah, it's pretty successful so far. This program, by the way, which I write about in my books, if you've read my book, you know it, started in 2007. They have yet to lose a single client to domestic violence homicide since they started this program. 2007. Yeah. I'm embarrassingly bad at math, but that seems like a long time. So she says this to me, and then immediately her brother hands her this big list of stuff she has to buy at the, like, you know, farmer's market and the beer store and the whatever. She's like, well, gotta go, you know. We figured out domestic violence homicide, gotta go. I was like, well, I am very strong like bull. I will carry your beer for you. So literally for the next 3 hours, I'm like, oh, like carrying stuff, like, oh, tell me more. Can you write that down for me? Because I don't have any hand, you know. And she slowly begins to pull away these blinders that I had been operating with for years, 15 years as a journalist. And I didn't even know they were myths, right, until she told me that they were myths. And I'm talking here about things like, you know, if a situation was bad enough, a victim would just leave. Or, you know, if someone's in a domestic violence situation, why doesn't she just leave? Which, incidentally, I devote the first 100 pages of my book to that question, that one question. If you don't come away understanding why that's a bad question to ask after you read my book, you got to reread it. You know, I thought that restraining orders in shelters were like our response, and that was all we had to do, and then that was fine. We solved that problem, you know. I thought that violent people were just violent and could never be nonviolent. I thought that if you were in a violent relationship, it was because you made bad choices. All of these things that anyone who works in the domestic violence field can tell you are pervasive still today. So I want to back up for a quick second and get back to fiction. One of the first things you learn when you're studying fiction, it's so hard. I teach in an MFA program. I shouldn't make fun of it because we are serious about our pedagogy, but it's like, kind of ridiculous also. One of the things you learn is how plot works, right? And so I get these students who come in and they're like, oh, plot, oh, okay, I'm gonna blow up a building, and then somebody has to get raped because there's no short stories without rape, and then I'm gonna like have the cops come and there'll be like a shootout, right? And they're just basically writing like, video games or a lot of the movies that you see where it's like these disconnected kind of events, right? Like this terrible thing happens and then another terrible thing happens and another terrible thing. And what you learn when you actually study plot is that plot is a series of cause and effect that increases in escalation. So someone goes to the grocery store and they're trying to decide between, American cheese and Swiss cheese, and they pick Swiss cheese. And because they pick Swiss cheese, someone at their dinner party is allergic to Swiss cheese. And because they ate that Swiss cheese, now there's an allergy happening, right? And you could, that's a really bad story idea, but if anybody here wants it, you're welcome to it. But you can begin to see how one tiny decision, do I turn left or right, leads to some other action where you are then forced to make another decision about turning left or right, to make another decision, okay? So keep that in mind. Back to Suzanne. During those 2 or 3 hours that I was her Sherpa, I learned all kinds of fascinating things. I learned, for example, that strangulation is different than a punch or a kick to the ribs in terms of quantifying lethality. I had no idea that strangulation would be different, non-fatal strangulation. I learned that guns escalate the danger. I learned that beatings while pregnant are a sign of high lethality. There's 2 kinds of abusers, right? There's the kind that back away when you're pregnant and the kind that ramp up the violence when you're pregnant. She tells me that domestic violence is not only a problem for poor people or people of color or women only. She tells me that there are about 20 behaviors that are associated to an increase in lethality. And these behaviors, many of you in this room know of these behaviors already, research done by Jacqueline Campbell. These behaviors are on something called the danger assessment. How many of you have heard of the danger assessment? Okay, so any of you can go and look this up. I think the website is dangerassessment.org. And you can look at these risk indicators, right? You can have your friends look at them if you're concerned about friends. So she tells me that they use this risk assessment to kind of come up with a score and determine the level of dangerousness that any given victim is in. And I am just blown away. This afternoon, and this story becomes, honestly, my life's work. That was 2009. What are we in 2021? If we don't count 2020 as a year, then, I'm at 11 years. It has informed everything I've done. That was my first story I wrote about for The New Yorker. It became the seed of the book. It became the seed of my passion for domestic violence work. So I'm going to illustrate this with a little story from the book. I'm going to illustrate this plot and how this danger assessment works. So there's a young woman, 14 years old. Her name is Michelle Monson-Mosier. She lives in Billings, Montana. She's the middle child of 3 girls. Her parents have an amicable divorce. They live near each other. And she's a pretty good kid. She does her chores. She mows the lawn even. I don't know what I would have to do to get my kid to mow the lawn. I don't know, buy her a new house or something. I don't even know. She doesn't really get in a lot of trouble at school. When she's 14, she's a freshman in high school, she meets this boy after school one day, and she's like, insta-love, he's cute, he's got his own car, he's got his own car, he's got his own car. Her parents don't know it, but he's 24. He looks a lot younger, right? So they find out, parents find out, they say, this absolutely, like, no. We're like, just no. And she fights back a little bit, but, she says, okay, we stopped dating. But both parents, of course, work full-time, like most humans on the planet. So they're gone from the time she gets home from school till, 6 o'clock at night. So, of course, she didn't stop seeing him. It'd be shocking to all of you parents in the room. She didn't stop seeing him. And by 15, she's pregnant. And she tells her mom, and her mom says, I'm charging him with statutory rape. And she says, well, if you do that, I'm going to take off with him and the baby, and you'll never see any of us again. I'm the parent of a 13-year-old girl. What choice did that mother have, right? None. She really had no choice. So Michelle gives birth to a little girl named Christy, who was born prematurely and has lung problems and things, and so she's in the NICU for about 3 months, 2 or 3 months. And eventually she brings the little girl home to her mother's house, Michelle, and they live there. And Rocky comes every day and he visits, and Michelle's mother, Sally, kind of tolerates it and at least gives him credit for being in the kid's life. And then when she's 16, she gets pregnant again. I know, right? And she says to her mom, I'm moving in with Rocky, with the 2 kids. Like, it's ridiculous. We're a family. We deserve a shot at being a family. And so she moves into this little trailer, kind of on the outskirts of Billings, 1-bedroom trailer, 2 kids, and Rocky and Michelle. And what's amazing about Michelle is she graduates high school on time. Like 18 years old, she graduates high school. She has 2 kids under the age of 3. Like, think of the resilience and determination in her to be able to do that. Like, amazing contributor to community, right? So she graduates high school. Meanwhile, Rocky, who'd been working on a seismic crew, which took him out of town for weeks at a time, said, I don't want to be away from my family. I'm a family man now. I quit. And he never has regular full-time work again. It's like seasonal work, roofing, construction, that kind of thing. So they have a lot of money problems. They're still living in this tiny trailer, and her dad says, this is crazy, you cannot, with 2 kids, live in a 1-bedroom trailer. I'm gonna build a new house outside of the city, and I will rent you my house at a reduced rate. And they're like, great. And so that's what they do. So the house they live in Billings, I know there's at least 1 or 2 people from Montana, right? It's like my second favorite state. Sorry, it's very close to LA, but it doesn't have the ocean. But it someday will have the ocean, right? So get your beachfront property in Billings. So she lives walking distance to Montana State University, a kind of long walk, and then also the parking lot of the emergency room, that local hospital, is also right behind her house. So there's a lot of commercial stuff in that area, and she one day offers to get a job cleaning at a Motel 6 that is right around the corner from them. And she says to Rocky, I can be home if the kids need me, and it's close enough to walk, so we don't have to have a second car. And he flips out. He starts screaming at her, my wife is, or they weren't married, my girlfriend isn't gonna be living with, or sleeping with all the customers at a Motel 6. How can you even say that? What you're saying to me is that I don't support my family, right? He took it as an emasculation. Am I saying that word right? Emasculation? It's a problem when you're a writer, you don't say things out loud that often. You're just typing. And he's screaming this at her. And at one point he gets her grandfather's hunting rifle, comes back, lines the 3 kids up, and starts marching back and forth. I will kill you if you ever do this to me again, right? Just completely out of proportion for her suggestion that she help out financially. So once he calms down a little bit, she calls his parents, and they're like, what the? Okay, come on, dude. So, they come over, they're like, what are you doing? You can't do this to your family. This is crazy. His dad goes around, he can't take the gun because it's Michelle's grandfather's, but he, collects as much ammunition as he can. He says, you can't be doing this stuff. And Rocky's like, I know, I just lost it. It won't happen again. I feel really terrible. He apologizes to Michelle. and they leave. We're going to call that system number one, informal system number one, Rocky's family, okay? So things are calm, but what is the message that she as the victim is left with? That this little system that she has tried to get help from ultimately isn't going to help her. Why is she left with that system? Because at the end of that whole argument, that whole thing, she still is not allowed to get a job. He's still in charge, right? And so she gets that. She never, ever works outside the home. So a few months go by. Again, I mentioned that Christy, their little girl, had been born with these lung issues because she was a preemie, so she kind of had ongoing lung problems throughout her life. And so at one point, Michelle, she's so freaking smart, she says, why don't I go take some nursing classes at Montana State, and that way, we won't have to take her to the ER as often, so I'll be at home with her more often, and we'll save money on the hospital bills. Imagine the calculation, right? She has read him, and she's figuring out her way around things. So smart. Domestic violence victims are the smartest people I know. And he says, okay. So she goes to Montana State. She signs up for classes. She applies for financial aid. They said, great, bring us your tax returns. And she's like, I don't have any tax returns. And they're like, okay, well, you're 19. Bring us your parents' tax returns. And she's like, I haven't lived with my parents in like 3 years. I have 2 kids. Like, that's crazy. They don't claim me. And they're like, okay, well, then bring us your husband's tax returns. And she's like, I'm not married. And they said, well, you better get married then. So I mention this because bureaucracy holds victims in place. If any of you work at a bank, here's my question for you. How easy is it to separate out the accounts of married people, right? You need signatures from both. What if someone's fleeing the other one? There are ways in which bureaucracy really is the thing that we can control pretty easily. That'll be next year's talk, though. So she does it. She marries him. She marries him like 2 days later at a justice of the peace, and she applies for financial aid. She gets it, and he drives her to class and waits for her and brings her home. Why is he doing this? Because he wants her to know that she is granted this freedom at his behest only. He is still in control, right? So he's in and out of work. Money is always tight. He's also doing drugs and drinking a lot around this time. And she was a very private person, but she begins to open up a little bit, and she says to her father, like, what I really want to do is get a nursing degree so that I can support the kids and not have to live with Rocky. Like, he's just not that nice, is how she puts it to her father. And he says, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we put the house in your name in a land contract, and we won't tell him. So smart. So that's what they do. Rocky never finds out, right? She gets the deed with her name on it. They're still paying her father. And her plan is to finish her nursing degree and then to legally force Rocky to leave the house. It's a great plan. Let me just tell you, this is what leaving looks like. Leaving is not a suitcase packed at the door like you're going to Vegas for the weekend. Leaving is a set of careful background maneuvers, sometimes years in the making. Years. The problem is that all of our systems are event-based, right? The police come, they want to know what happened in this moment. The court wants to know what happened in this moment. All of these systems, healthcare, they're all event-based, but domestic violence is a narrative-based situation, right? So at one point, she goes to her mother and her sister, and she says, I think Rocky's having an affair. I want to go to the doctor. Michelle was like a hypochondriac, too. And so no one believes that Rocky was having an affair, but her mother takes her to the doctor, and the doctor checks her for STDs, you know, she's fine, but gives her a prescription for antidepressants. This is interesting because this is a doctor who only ever sees her that one time, but doesn't ask any further questions. Michelle brings the antidepressants home, she fills them, brings them home, Rocky sees them, says, I'm not gonna have a psycho wife on my hands, and throws them away. She's also, by the way, not allowed to have friends over because he says they're a bad influence on the kids. He also says, you know, your family doesn't like me. I don't want to spend holidays with them. This is interesting. He knows how to read her too, right? He's not saying, I hate your family. He's saying, your family hates me. He knows how to get at her emotionally, right? And so they basically spend all of their time with his family. So shortly after the non-STD event, she shows up at her mother's house with the two kids, Christy and Kyle are their names, and she says, I'm leaving the kids here for a little while. I'm going home to confront Rocky about the affair. Do not let him have them. Do not let him take them. And she leaves. Now, this is an interesting moment because her mother doesn't know how to read what Michelle is actually saying. But what Michelle is actually saying is, he takes these kids and uses them as collateral to get me to do what I want. How many of you domestic violence advocates have seen this in your clients? Yeah, over and over again, right? There's a reason my book is called No Visible Bruises, right? You look at that I don't know if any of you watched the whole hour-plus body cam footage of Gabby Petito in the Utah case? I did. I watched it all, right? He's got a couple scratches on him. She says they grabbed my jaw. Looks a lot like strangulation to me, but what do I know? And the police dismiss that entirely because only 15% of strangulation injuries are visible to the naked eye, and those police were not trained on how to find the non-visible signs, right? So they name her as the primary aggressor. So back to Michelle. Michelle's mother is there with the kids. Her younger sister, Melanie, is there. Melanie is 6 months pregnant at the time. Within the hour, Sally, Michelle's mother, sees Rocky and sees him pull up and just tear across her lawn. She said he had a face of a devil, like he was just terrifying. And she panics. She locks the front door, locks the back door, and this is something I would do. This is why I'm no good in an emergency, let me just tell you. I was married to an ex-commando. I was like, he's your emergency guy, not me. She throws the kids on the couch and just like throws her body on them. Seriously, once he fell out of a raft, we were river rafting, and this was my reaction. Oh no. He seems so nice. So Rocky comes in. I probably shouldn't interject humor in such a serious story, but you need a little emotional release, right? Rocky comes in. He's breaking down the back door. They can hear him. He leaves like a trail of blood down the door. He lets himself in, and he just whips Sally off the kids, of course, and he takes Christy, throws her over his shoulder, and he's out the door. Before he's out the door, Melanie, the pregnant sister, tries to stop him. He assaults her. He leaves her bruised from her shoulder to her wrist, and then he's gone. Michelle comes back minutes later. She's freaking out. She's upset. She's sobbing. And for the first time ever, she begins to tell her mother about these years and years of abuse. He beat me in front of the kids. He takes the kids all the time when I do something to piss him off. He won't let me see friends, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, and by the way, recently he went up to a place on the outskirts of Billings called the Rims. You know the Rims? Am I saying it right? And he got a rattlesnake, and he brought it home. And it's in a cage, and he tells me he's going to put it in bed with me if I do anything to piss him off. You know, California has a new coercive control law, one of only 2 states that has it. One of the many reasons I love this state. Think of that snake when anyone asks you what coercive control is, right? You don't need a black eye. So Sally is like, oh my God, we have to call the police. So this is the third system. Michelle tries her family system, right? That obviously doesn't work. Families don't know what to do. So they're now in their third system, but their first formal system. The police come and they say, well, what do you want us to charge it with? It's his kid. Like, this is his family home, his mother-in-law, right? They're related. And Michelle and Sally are like, I don't know, isn't it your job to know what the charges are? So they charge him with criminal mischief And the next morning, he'd been out at a motel with Christy. The next morning he pulls up, the police are there waiting for him. He gets arrested because there's a warrant for his arrest. So far, so good, right? And Michelle then goes to the DA's office with her mother, and she files an affidavit and files for a restraining order for the first time ever. First time she's interacted with these systems. She talks about the snake, she talks about the beatings, everything. I have a copy of this affidavit. And then she and her mother leave. About 45 minutes after she files that for that restraining order, she gets a call from Rocky's mom, Sarah. Oh, sweetheart, Rocky told us what happened. It's just devastating. What a imbecile. I'm so mad at him, I can't even tell you. So he's agreed to stay at his brother's house while you guys figure out what you're gonna do. But anyway, he wants to talk to you. We bailed him out. Michelle hears that phrase and freaks out. She turns right around, drives back to the DA's office, recants everything, says she made it all up. There was no snake, she made it up. She wants to drop all the charges. For the next 2 months, Rocky and Michelle talk to no one. They don't see his family, they don't see her family, they don't answer the phone. No one sees them, no one knows what's going on. I know what's going on, of course. She's on a daily basis negotiating for her life and the life of her children. But her family doesn't know that, and his family doesn't know that. His family, I just want to reiterate here, did everything that they could, including spending a lot of time talking to me, which was a real act of courage and bravery. Just before Thanksgiving, about 2 months after the incident with the restraining order, Michelle's sister, father, and mother go to the house because they haven't heard from them in so long, and they find all 4 of them. Michelle is shot 4 times. Christy is shot twice. Kyle, whose last meal was a green gummy candy, was shot. And then Rocky shot himself. So this story, like all domestic violence homicide stories, follows a predictable plot, right? What does it illuminate for us? The first outsiders to come are his family with the gun, right? The message is, you can call us, but we're not going to be able to do much. The second system she tries is her own family. What happens? He overpowers her mother, takes the kid, says, I'm still the one in charge. She gets that message. So she reaches out to law enforcement. Law enforcement is like, There's a lot of great law enforcement out there. These 2 were not great. And I have to say, I'm going to talk about some of the changes that Billings has made in the years since Michelle and her children's death. She also tries to some extent the medical system, right? Who gives her antidepressants, but they can't really do much. She interacts with the education system, who uses bureaucracy to further embed her with this man. She reaches out to the judiciary. This is her last-ditch effort to some extent, and the judiciary is like, what am I going to do? I've got a witness who isn't going to cooperate, and I have a police report that's really crappily written. I'm sure that's not a word. Crappily written. Terribly written. There you go. Revision. Here's what he could have been charged with for breaking into her mother's house. He could have been charged with burglary, unlawful entry, and remaining unlawfully within the house, criminal mischief, vandalism, and criminal endangerment, which in Montana is a felony. Criminal endangerment for having a live rattlesnake in your home with your children. So she dips her toes in all of these systems. Very often we hear, she only called the police once, so it must not have been that big of a problem. No, very often it's the ones who only call once that are the bigger problems, right? Very often it's the ones who don't show up to renew their restraining orders that are in the most trouble, right? So she tries system after system after system. And by the time she finally files a restraining order, he's basically out of jail. And she gets this message. She gets the message. The message is this: the system, every system, prioritizes his freedom over your safety, over your life, in fact. And she gets it. How do we know she gets it? Because she turns right around and recants. Right? It's her last-ditch show of loyalty to him. No, 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 I don't want these people involved. It's just you and me, babe. I'm so sorry. I didn't want to do it. You know, my mom made me, whatever she said. The DA knew she was lying. I interviewed the DA. She knew she was lying. You know, she said, the police report was so bad it didn't even get Christy's age right. It said she was 9. In fact, she was 7. She didn't connect with the medical system. She has lost her key witness. But she also doesn't do anything to try to address what she knows is a potentially lethal situation. She could have sent the police out to investigate and seen the snake themselves, right? Material evidence. She could have interviewed Michelle's family members or Rocky's family members or neighbors. Remember the sister who was assaulted? She had all kinds of visible marks, right? She does none of these, partly because she's overworked, and so she tosses the entire case. And Michelle is left with message after message from every system: healthcare, education, law enforcement, and the judiciary. Every system says, we can't help you. His freedom is more important. Today in Montana, there are a couple of things that are different as a result of Michelle's case. One of them is that if you are arrested for partner and family violence in the state of Montana, you cannot bail out until after you see a judge, and you cannot see a judge before lunch. That sounds like a very insignificant change, but I'll tell you what that does. Rocky was arrested about 8 in the morning, and he was out by 9, right? If he would be arrested today at 8 in the morning, he wouldn't be out until 1 in the afternoon. What do those mere hours do for a victim? I'll tell you what they do. They give a domestic violence advocate enough time to connect with the victim to say, hey, there's this thing called the danger assessment. Let's take a few minutes and look and see what kind of danger you're really in. A lot of domestic violence victims know they're in danger, but they can't quantify it. They don't know how much. It's all sort of amorphous and ambiguous, right? I did a posthumous danger assessment on Michelle, and she scored an 18. How high is that, those of you who know? It's about as high as they get, right? A perfect score would be 20. So that is the group in Massachusetts who first got me onto all this stuff, who do the sort of lethality risk assessment. 18 and higher is the highest lethality category that they have. So that's one thing, right? Michelle would have known. She's not just making it up in her head. She is, in fact, in danger. Also, the house is in her name. They could have changed the locks. They could have put security cameras out, right? They could have packed up some of her stuff and taken her to emergency shelter. 3 to 4 hours, that's all you need in a jurisdiction, right? It's amazing. Like, that costs nothing. It might cost a little something, but it's really nothing. The other thing Billings has done is that they do now have a dedicated domestic violence police officer. When I was there, she was incredible. I don't know if she's still in the job or not, but you know, she would have followed up with Michelle. The other thing that they do in Montana today is they have a restraining order that comes on what looks like a driver's license or a credit card. It's that size and it's laminated. Most restraining orders come on a piece of paper like this, 8.5 by 11, right? And then if you're like me, you fold this up and you put it in your purse and it gets lipstick on it and some dust and then some gum wrappers. And then, you know, it sort of starts to fall apart because you're carrying books in there and whatever. And so, you know, within 3 weeks, this piece of paper is like this ratty, unreadable thing. You think, oh, that's no big deal though. Like, come on, how serious can that be? There's a case in Montana of a police officer not being able to read the restraining order and so not enforcing it, and this woman was killed that night. Why does this matter? These little things can make such a difference. So in Montana today, you can get this thing, they call it the Hope Card. A lot of states are starting to do it now. And victims like Michelle can get as many of these as they want, right? So it has a picture of the abuser, the exclusion zones, the dates that it's relevant, and they can get 20 of those if they want. They can pass them out at work. Hey, if you see this guy, he's not supposed to be here. They can pass them out to the teachers at their kids' school. They can pass them out to their neighbors, right? Because here's the thing. The night that Michelle and her kids were killed, we don't know exactly what happened, but Rocky was outside of the house and he was peering in the windows. A neighbor saw him. What would have happened had that neighbor had a hope card to say, I know that's the guy who lives there, but I also know he's not supposed to be there. I'm going to call the police. Right? These are things that cost such a small amount of money, such a small amount of money. So there are changes out there, and there are solutions. You know, my book is not just like one depressing story after another. It actually has people that are out there doing incredible things, people like Human Options, right? That video that I've seen about 6 times now. I've watched it over and over, and I was like, I'm not gonna cry, not gonna cry. No, you get tears the first time, and then that's it. No more tears. That is an incredible program, because police officers are event-based, but domestic violence advocates are narrative-based. You put those two things together, and that is a powerful partnership, right? How much money does it cost to do that partnership? It's like $5,000. Come on, that's nothing. It's a lot of money to me, but it's nothing in the scheme of saving someone's life. We try to do that in DC, and we don't have funding to have someone 24/7, 365. So the fact that you all are able to do it is really an amazing testimony. You know, domestic violence is one frame to view the world, right? To view the incredible social issues that we face. But as a frame, it has vast public consequences. It intersects just about every major social issue that we face as a country today. From mass incarceration, you know, 80% of male inmates are either the victims or witnesses of childhood abuse, 92% for women. It's the leading cause of homelessness for women in this country, the leading cause of homelessness. In mass shootings, 54% of them, although that stat I think is lower than the reality, 54% of mass shootings are domestic violence homicide. Not that they predict it, not that they're a precursor, but they are. The first mass shooting in this country, the University of Texas Tower back in the 60s with Charles Whitman, I think his name was, he started the night before by killing his mother and his wife. Just like Adam Lanza did in Newtown, killed his mother before he killed those beautiful little children. Those are only the ones that are domestic violence homicide. There's also other ones, like the Orlando Pulse shooting, which I covered as a journalist for The New Yorker, where Omar Mateen didn't kill his wife before he killed those people at the Pulse nightclub, but he strangled her over and over and over, which should have been 10 years in prison for him and a lifetime ban on owning guns. But he was never even charged. Domestic violence costs us billions of dollars every year in lost wages, incarceration, in court fees, in healthcare costs, in law enforcement. For every 20 seconds I've been up here, someone in this country has been assaulted. And around the world today, 137 women will be killed. That doesn't count children, doesn't count men. So when I'm up here talking about domestic violence, what I'm actually talking about is the story of homelessness, the story of gender inequality, the story of mass shootings, the story of mass incarceration and trafficking and sexual assault and foster children and teen dating violence, and every story that we are facing in a pretty broken world. As a writer and a journalist, my job is simple, right? What are the systems I'm investigating? Who benefits and who loses? Like, that's the foundation of every good story of journalism, or should be. We need to make systemic changes, most certainly. But we also are part of all of these systems, right? We also live in our communities. And so one of the things I get asked all the time is like, what can we do? What can we do as individuals? And this is the thing I say, like, figure out what systems you're part of. Political systems, career systems, yes, but also, are you in a reading group? Do you go to church, right? Who are the people in your, do your kids play on a sports team? My kid is taking up the bougie sport of lacrosse, which is really, like, I don't know, I'm kind of a basketball girl myself, but what systems are you part of, and what conversations can you have, right? Because one of the things I learned that day from Suzanne is that the system I was involved in, the media, was failing domestic violence victims. I personally was failing domestic violence victims. I failed so many of those people I wrote stories about. I really did. And my book is an attempt to set that system right to some extent. My book is an attempt to educate people in my own system, because we need to know what victims can't say. We need to know what they don't know they may be saying. I really think it's up to us to understand this context. I'm going to leave you with one final quote. This is my favorite Gandhi quote. I know Gandhi, everybody uses Gandhi and Martin Luther King, like whatever, but come on, it's Gandhi. This is my favorite quote by him. In a gentle way, he said, you can shake the world. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Rachel, for such an amazing educational opportunity and speech. Well, please join me in another round of applause. My role was to try and wrap that up. I think she said it perfectly. There were so many things when she was speaking about systems and changes and little pieces, little actions that we can all take. I was like, yes, 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 and yes. This year, our board of directors just approved strategic priorities for the next 3 to 5 years, of which 2 are straightly focused on systems improvement for victims of domestic violence. You will hear from us throughout the next few years on how we know we can improve the systems so that when someone reaches out, they have someone to listen and that they are heard and respected and understood. The biggest change when it comes to community education is we should not be asking why she stays, we should be asking why he batters. And so we'll be focused on really improving how we address domestic violence from men, children, women, and also how each and every one of you can be part of the change that we seek to see in the world, because from awareness comes action, and now it's time to take action. Thank you. Joining me back on stage is Jason, and he'll be drawing the opportunity drawing. I know all of you are really excited about it. While we are getting the tickets to draw, I just wanted to take a minute and thank the Marriott for this beautiful setting and the incredible staff that are here. Thank you for making this so special. 2 years ago when we were here, one of the most incredible things that happened is there were some employees that just were so impressed by the work that they did, and they've continued to do such an outstanding job for us. And so thank you, Marriott, for having us here and these great opportunities.
All right, let's see who our lucky winners are. For the 2 incredible local weekend getaways donated by Marriott Orange County. 816-8538. Anyone?
Is there a name on it?
I don't see a name. Oh, we got someone. Where? Oh. Awesome. Okay. All right, last one. 816-8458. All right. All right, in closing, I just want to thank all of you for coming today and watching online. Rachel will stay for a short time afterwards for further questions or conversation. Thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your day.